So this is a presentation I've done about doing better news habits, and I'm just going to quickly go through it. The idea of this is to make news gathering fun, as well as creating a habit. So the fun part's pretty self-explanatory. I used to do some of these things on Fridays, and I call it Fun Fridays, which it feels kind of weird making work out of collecting news, but it really worked for me and my students to say we're going to do something different. I do have a habit-driven news gathering activity, and that's news journals, and I'll explain that. But I'll try to give you a lot about both news tag and news journals. But news journals comes first in the presentation, so you may get a side note about that before we get to the thing you're trying to do right now. If you don't make it fun and if you don't provide a compelling reason, kids will not glom onto this at first. So. I really think it's important to give them the framework and explain the why behind it, and then also tell them that it's hard, that when we start this, it's not going to be easy, but that's okay. So because they'll get frustrated the first couple of times, this is a skill set they simply don't have. And by the way, it's not just kids that don't have this skill set. I actually do these activities with my graduate students at Kent State who are full-grown teaching adults, and it is not easy for them to get this going first either. This simply isn't a natural skill, so it's okay that it's going to take a little while to get good at it. That also says that also kind of sends a message back to you as the teacher that you're going to have to make a commitment to this. Like you said, that your kids are sort of woo-woo out there right now. You'd have to kind of commit to doing this regularly over spring semester, even if they say they don't like it the first time or two. And then you want to start the year with this next year if you think this is something you want to embed in your curriculum. So I'm going to talk about news journals, which I have done at every school I've been at so that's more than 20 years worth of this. Um, it's because of the skills it builds now more than ever. Kids just aren't scanning news. Most of your students are getting their news via a mediated person. They've got a TikTok influencer usually, or they're doing something like if they're older, like maybe you are, you're getting it through someone like Colbert. I'm saying as an example, I know you read headlines and stuff, but they're not really sitting around going to the front page of the New York Times and the Washington Post. They're quickly getting this, and often it is via TikTok, and often it's a curated set of headlines with a lot of um, commentary. So the reason that news journals are different is that they're based, the whole idea of this exercise is that it's based on news fluency, how to train to scan for a story, which is its own specific skill, how to synthesize key points, recall details easily. And it teaches the reason once you start sharing out your news journals, you quickly learn why that basic 5 W's and an H, who, what, where, when, why, and how are so crucial, because if kids don't share these in their news journals, people will start asking the questions. So really fast, and I feel like this is going to take too long to explain well here, but so I'm going to just thinly explain that. I'm happy to meet with you on Zoom if this would help. Um, a news journal is an ongoing assignment. It happens every class day that the class meets. As homework, it should take no more than 20 minutes. And for a complete round robin, which is the way it always happened in class, a complete round robin had to stay within a 10 to 20 minute time frame, which meant in a recap from each person, about a minute on each story. Rules of the road, it has to be a major print publication, not broadcast TV or radio. Can be online or in print, but everybody chose online. You scan the publication to see what you like, and then you choose any news article that resonates. And then either in a notes file or a computer file, or a lot of kids chose to keep an analog notebook, which I thought was kind of cool. They just liked that aspect of doing it. So however it worked for them is a way it worked for me. Um, they would write 150 to 200 words about the story, not copying the language of the article, but recasting it in their own language. And for the heading of each news journal, it has a headline, the reporter's name who wrote the piece, the news source, and the date of publication. That has to be on the news journal. And then they write that 150 words. Basically, the way that I'll explain how that works in a second. You can choose any subject you love, but it has to be a news story. News story. I've had students write about National Geographic or weird science journals. One student used Le Monde in France and read it in French and then wrote her news journal in English. It can be a political news, local news, sports news, animal news, and weird news counts. So Animal news, there were always bobcats in Northern California somewhere or mountain lions. So I always loved it when there was a weird news about mountain lions or coyotes have been spotted. Florida Man is actually a whole category that's hilarious. They are legitimate news stories, but they're hilarious. You can look it up. Florida Man does this, that, or the other thing. These are not opinion pieces, no columns, no editorials, no first person, only news stories. For the grading of this, this can become terrible if you don't create a really fast heuristic. I literally asked my students, after I checked this hard the first time or two, I gave 3 points per journal. I did it visually and fast. When I would walk into the classroom, the bell would ring. I would say, show me your news journals. They literally held up their notebooks to me. I could tell how long they were. They held up their phone if it had the news journal on it. That's what it was. If there was someone that I thought maybe had not done their news journal or was messing around, I just walked around to them while we were going through the news journals. And if someone didn't do it, just by the way, kids get really busy. 3 points will not kill your grade. Lying and cheating about 3 points is so worthless. So I would actually say if you haven't done your news journal, just tell me you haven't done your news journal. I will not shame you. I will not say, oh my gosh. I will just say, often it was an editor in chief who had been at deadline the night before till like all hours. And they would say, I didn't do my news journal. I'd say, okay, thanks for being honest. And I would go on. And for kids to see a leader say, I didn't do it because I was at deadline last night, or I didn't do it because our team got back so late. Fine. Thank you for telling me that. Because otherwise kids are like, oh, I didn't do it, but can I get extra credit? So part of this is also you can weave in a better way of accountability and honor as long as you, the teacher, follow through on your word. Um, we started every class with this. It was a bell ringer, and I tried to get through this about in 15 minutes. I had block periods that were 85 minutes long, so 15 minutes was a good way to start. And kind of got everybody centered in. Did this once a week in yearbook, and I use feature journals. The advisor or anyone in the class can ask questions about each person's news journal, and then what they do is they quickly, it has to be a news story that's happened in the last 72 hours or it's not news. Summarize the 5 W's and an H in a 60, 100-word graph, so that's usually 3 or 4 sentences. And then in the brief second graph, the person doing the news journal explains why they selected it. Because this is about news value to a person. This is actually interesting when you hear it out loud time over time. It sort of embeds the idea of what is it that people are choosing and what draws a person to a story. So what made the story relevant to you to choose it and discuss it? A lot of times kids will say it's an issue that's relevant to me, so I wanted to know more. That's important for kids to hear. And sometimes they'll say, well, maybe it's about travel advisories. They say, I'm going to get on a plane this week and I wanted to know what was going on. And that's, again, teaches all that stuff. Um, when they complete the news journal, they'll be coming into class, and I think I've explained how to do that. You just start with, I usually would say, who wants to start with news journals? And I would remind them 30 to 60, I would say, show me your news journals. Who wants to start? 30 to 60 seconds. You can either choose the next person or we can just go around. Choose the next person also makes it easier that people kind of are paying more attention. You can ask questions when they're presented, and often people will start to do that. That becomes engaging. You'll also notice that a lot of times kids choose the same story, and it's not because they copied, it's because it's a big story, and you start to see that big stories draw people to them, including teenagers. Mm. Okay, quick thing about news journals, they become a timekeeper. Um, I have students who still have their news journals and they're in their 30s now. They just say it showed what they were thinking about, caring about, looking at. Um, it becomes a record of what happened that year in their life. And it just kind of, they like the routine of this. It is a form of journaling. It's a light form of journaling. Over to the left here on this thing, I showed you the top news stories that I had found from class discussions and notes. This is pre-pandemic, but this was just an example of what people were looking at, the stories that they were paying attention to. And you can see that some of the things are very local to us, where we were, the PG&E fires, the shootings that were happening in California, California earthquakes, stuff like that. Um, one thing that can happen with news journals if you decide to do this, and this would take you all spring and it would take a lot of your class time. You got to kind of keep it moving, but you can use news journals for pitches every now and then. You can, like every couple of weeks, you can say, take your news journals if you're going through Ideas for your next publication. You assign kids to be in groups of 3 or 4. Try to put an upperclassman in it if you can to keep things on track. And you just say, what have you covered in the last couple of weeks? And then you can brainstorm some local story angles. If you start to hear stuff, you say, well, how could we write about that? Or everybody chose that for news journalists. It must be really important. How could we cover it, especially since it's, 3 weeks old now? How do we cover that as a news feature story next issue? Feature journals are just like news journals. It's you do a feature story and you explain the rules of a feature story, what makes a feature story, and you have them look up features. By this point, if you've been doing this for a while, many of the stories they are choosing will not be standard news stories anymore. They will have started selecting news feature stories, which still count. But when you want them to do actual feature stories like magazine style, then you kind of have to change the frame and say, I'm going to give you magazines and I want you to go for these. They'll tend to be longer because magazine pieces are usually over 2,000 words. That's what I call long form, is over 2,000 words. And some examples would be the New Yorker, New York Times Magazine, or Teen Vogue. Teen Vogue is doing an awesome job with a lot of stories right now. Okay, so here we are to news tag, and I think what I'm going to do is just go through the news tag, and then I'm going to leave you to look at the other stuff. Please feel free to shoot me an email back if you want to have a conversation about any of this. I'm happy to talk. So news tag. News tag is a fun event. I would usually do this as a fun Friday thing. So once a week or once every couple of weeks, I would do this. And it's tied to the NPR broadcast, which you will see if you go to the NPR page. You will see your local affiliate up here with a thing called hourly news. You can see my cursor right there. It'll say hourly news. If you hit this and you want to, usually I would ask a student to queue it up at the beginning of class. Say, would you queue up NPR to the news broadcast? And they would find this and get it all set. And I would ask them to hit play and I would ask them to close it out, all of that. But you'll see this is roughly 5 minutes and it comes with a break in the middle. So that's where you find this, and this is using NPR news tag. If you're going to start this, I really feel it's helpful to explain to the kids because this is hard. It is fun, but it's hard. Excuse me again. I'll take a quick sip of coffee. The skills are going to build with this are auditory attention, fast handwriting, which is going to be a killer for them. How to make better use of their reporter's notebook. So if they don't have a reporter's notebook, you might want to distribute one now. And if you don't have reporter's notebooks, then you're going to want to tell them that they need to find open space in their notebook where they can tear the pages out later if they like to keep a tidy notebook. And you have to tell them they're writing fast, messy, skipping lines, not even paying attention to lines. There's no way you can do this neatly. It's impossible. So whatever they're going to use, they are going to learn a lot about themselves, about how impossible their bad writing is to read, and they will get better at finding symbols and cues. They are allowed to write using any of the abbreviations that helps them for this. This is legit. So people talk at over 150 words to 200 words a minute. It's going to be very hard to keep up with. Did I say that right? Yes, I did. So it's really hard to keep up with what's going on. The goal here is to capture key details of the story, 5 W's and an H. And of course, what happens with this is multi-tracking. Unlike in a classroom where they can passively pay attention to a presentation, look at it later on, look at it again, take notes if they feel like it, you will give them the most important stuff, which they will then take it again. They're getting this once. They get it once. They have to write like heck. They're trying to pay attention. They're trying to write. Their hands are going to hurt. They're also trying to think of what question could I ask about this to play the game. That's a lot. The first time I do this, I will often, only the first time I ever do this, I might play the broadcast twice because it's a new skill. Every time after that, it's one and done because that's how interviews work. And that's the point of this, is to gain an interview skill as a top-notch reporter. I'm going to say again, this takes a while and it's very frustrating the first time. So here's the rules. You use an NPR news summary broadcast and the students The end goal is they will be asking questions like a game show related to the broadcast. The easiest way to do this is first you assign a volunteer for first question. Who's going to ask first question? Person raises their hand. You can even do this before they know how to play the game. You can say, I'll explain it later, but you're going to ask first question. Sometimes that's kind of the person who's bravest. They'll be like, okay. And then I need someone to count to 10. And this sounds silly, but it actually, A, is a job. B, when you start doing this, it's easy to lose track of how long you've been doing it. So I would do 10 questions. Sometimes I would do 5. I would say, okay, count to 10. When we get to 10, raise your hand. We're done. So then you queue up the NPR broadcast. You play the NPR broadcast once. Once it starts going, everyone takes notes as fast as they can. When the broadcast is over, the first question is asked. And that question is anything from the broadcast about any of the news summaries there. They get to ask any question. Easy ones are like, what was the Dow Jones average today? But a lot of times it'll be hard stuff like, who was the person interviewed in the story taking place in Uganda? Or it will be, what did Congress vote on today? Well, like a lot of this would be like, who's been confirmed for a post today? As they go on, the questions will get harder. Smart kids will start to say, who is the reporter reporting on the story from Oklahoma? Those are all legitimate questions. So the person asks the question, they're supposed to call on the first person to raise their hand. If that person has the correct answer, you pass the baton to them. They get to ask a question. If they're wrong, then you call on someone, the student calls on someone else. You will notice that people start to learn the answers to the questions and they will self-correct. At the beginning, you'll probably be the one that has to referee this, but as it goes on, they'll get better. If you ask the question, you have to know the answer. You'll see why that's a rule probably the first time you play that. Someone will ask a question and they don't actually have the answer. When the 10th question comes up, your counter says that's 10, and you are done. All right, that's pretty much all I'm going to talk about. I did leave some information about current events quizzes, which you already know how to do, I think. So I hope that this helps you, and I hope that you are able to start engaging kids. This is a core skill of media literacy. If they're going to be journalists, this is the everything in their world. But trying to develop this, especially with second semester students, may be a little bit of an uphill battle for you. So I wish you well. I think it's a really valid exercise that you're engaging in, and I think it's really cool that you're about this. I would say that next year, after Labor Day, start this. I usually started this the Monday, or excuse me, the first day back after Labor Day in the fall. And this is something that we did all year long, every year. So it's a real time investment, I will say that, but it's probably one of the most worthy time investments I've ever had in the classroom. Okay, good luck, Natalie. I wish you well with all of this.